How to Play the Grudge by Tool, Part 2. This song is a journey, my friends, and as such, I want to make sure we are tackling this as effectively as possible. So if you haven't caught part 1 yet, click the link somewhere around here in this video, and also I will have that in the description for you as well. I cover a lot of important topics and parts in that video that I will continue to reference in this part 2. So if you haven't already, definitely check that out first and then come back to this video. So let's get started. So the first part up on the chopping block today is actually one of my favorite grooves from this song. And for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it the verse tom groove. And for reference, this kicks in about the 2-minute 40-second mark in the song. This is the one I'm talking about. And I have some fantastic news for you. The right hand is just doing 1/8 notes the entire time. And our left is doing a sort of 3-against-2 polyrhythmic-esque pattern. So the right hand are with our accents on the low floor tom, but we're going to be mostly on our high floor tom. Definitely not too bad, and keep in mind we are in 5/4 time. Now I'm going to add the left hand in. So the main melody, if you want to call it that, of this pattern is primarily using the left hand. One more time, a little slower. Now notice every time this pattern repeats, the turnaround changes and alternates slightly. So the first time we have snare, rack tom, floor tom. And then the second time, it's just the reverse. So floor tom, rack tom, snare. So once again, when we put the hands together, we wind up with not a perfect, but a 3-against-2-esque sound pattern. So it's this sound here. Orchestrated like the following. Okay, and then the last important thing to keep in mind with the hands here is we are hitting very hard in order to get the correct feel. If we're love tapping the drums, this is not going to sound good. Like versus wee bit of a difference there. So let's look at the feet now. And the kick pattern on this part is pretty manageable as well. For the most part, we are only hitting the kick drum whenever we hit together with both of our hands. So this is what that looks like. And then we just have a bit of a double right before the turnaround of the pattern. So adding that in now. Now, what Danny does as this progression moves along and as this pattern repeats, he slowly starts adding in more crashes throughout the pattern. Now, that would take forever to pick apart completely, but what I am going to do is just loop that a couple times, placing crashes in different spots so you can see what's going on both hands at a slow tempo. And so at the end there, you kind of got a glimpse of how Danny closes this pattern. So what that sounds like very slowly, the very last time around going to the next section is this. Now I'm going to put that all together as played on the record and play along to a click track at a slower tempo and then up at album tempo. Trucking along here, the next section is another iteration of what I call the rhythmic theme of this song. I think I called it Main Groove number 2 on the previous video. And in that video, I covered this in much more detail. So if you need some extra clarification, go check that first. And just like the previous time that this rhythm occurs in the song, we are doing it in unison with both hands on our floor toms with the same kick pattern as before, which very briefly to demonstrate sounds like this. Also notice where I'm playing the accents on the hands. Kind of goes along with the foot pattern. And for this section, all we're doing is essentially moving that pattern around the toms. So we start on our 2 floor toms and we run that pattern 4 times through. After the 4th repetition, we move up. So we are now on the low rack tom and the high floor tom. And then we will repeat that again 4 times. Afterward, we're going to keep our right hand on the floor tom, but we're going to move our left hand up to the higher rack tom. And we're going to play exactly that. And that's where we get to our first fill in this section, and that is a simple linear pattern between the hands and the feet. It's right, left, kick, kick, right, left, kick, kick. And that linear pattern is just a repeating cycle of right hand, right foot, left foot. And that orchestrated together looks like this. So we got 3 cycles. Be patient with that. If you're not used to doing linear fills like that, that can take time to get fast and clean. But clean is the key. Speed is nothing but control in disguise. So keep that in mind as you slowly build tempo on these fills. So we have that pattern, and then immediately after, we just have 2 eighth note flams on our floor tom. So together with what we just did, now we'll put that whole thing together. So we have a little bit of our theme rhythm, then our fill. And then after that, everything we just did repeats one more time, but we change the orchestration of the fill very slightly. So instead of, we take the last right left on the hands and place that on the snare, sounding like this. Okay, and then we have a third fill here, which follows a similar pattern, except now we're gonna be in the triplet 16th subdivision. And we're gonna start with our right hand in 2 kicks. And then after that, we are going to run down our toms. Now those 2 pieces together. All right, and then once we have that, we just have a few more flams on the toms, and this lines up with the lyrics sinking deeper. Now all of that together. Sweet. Now I will demo that whole section for you with the click. All right, we are moving right along to our verse 2 groove, and we are back in more of traditional drum beat territory between the kick, snare, and hi-hat. And so the first thing to point out is it is a 3-measure pattern. The first 2 are in 5, the third is in 7. So 5-4, 5-4, 7-4. And this comes directly out of the tom flams we just played, the sinking deeper. As you're hitting that China cymbal or crash, whatever you got at home, with your right hand on beat 1, that is your split second to reach down with your left and engage your snare wires. Up to this point, we've been snares off, but for this groove, we are engaging those and getting your typical snare drum sound. And so in terms of breaking down this groove, I'm going to start with the 5/4 measures. And this is actually a very simple 4/4 beat, just with a couple extra kick drum eighth notes added on to the end for the 5th beat of the 5/4. Here's what that sounds like in a basic form. So hopefully that makes sense, with the 5th beat being those 2 eighth notes on the kick drum. And then the measure of 7 starts in the same way. So we have our first 4 notes being our typical standard kick, snare, rock groove. And then the last 3 beats, again, sort of line up with the lyrics. So it's sinking deeper, and that comes right after the first 4 beats. So here's what that sounds like. So now I'm going to put that together. So 2 measures of 5 followed by 1 measure of 7. And now we're going to make this pattern start grooving by sprinkling in the little details here. So the first of which is going to be adding crashes on our beat 5 with our kick eighth notes. And then immediately after we do those crashes, we're going to open up our hi-hat for beat 1 of the following measure. That might sound like a lot. It's really not. Here's what that sounds like with those added in. Now, in terms of the ornamentation and making this, groove and have personality, those are really the only pieces that I would call must-haves. Everything else in here is really just going to be experimentation and what you like. I am going to just kind of groove through some of this with the metronome so you can hear it and see what's going on there. And if you're curious, Danny does do a little slide double in one of the 5/4 measures going into beat 4. And really all that is in triplet time. We're starting with our typical hi-hat and then adding a slide double right before the snare. So very slowly, that sounds like this. Hopefully that makes sense for you. I am now going to run all of this with the click at slow and fast tempo. I'm going to be playing around with some different hi-hat and cymbal ornamentation so you can see what's possible there. So you can add a little bit of your own little spice onto this groove. Here's that. Next up is what I'm calling the interlude, and this section begins at about the 412, 413 mark in the original track. And this is a linear groove all in 5/4. It's a little tricky, sounds very complicated. Once again, it's not too bad once we really kind of figure out what's going on here. The good news is it's pretty much the exact same all 3 times, except for a slight tweak on the turnaround on the 3rd repetition. So let's start digging in. So to explain this one, I am going to take it from where it is originally on the kit and just do it on the kick, snare, and hi-hat. It'll make much more sense that way. So I'm just going to play the whole pattern so you can see what it's like, and then we will start migrating it over to the toms and the cymbals and all that stuff. So here is the basic pattern that we're doing. I'm going to run that through one more time, super slow, hit by hit, so you can really see what's going on before we start moving it along. Okay, and now we are just going to move that pattern to the cymbals, the toms, and the snare. So note, we are keeping a steady 8th note on our right hand, and that is primarily staying on the cymbals until we do the run at the end, which is going to be just down the toms. So here's that very slow. Next thing we're going to add to this groove are accented bell hits on our ride cymbal. So instead of hitting your ride in the standard spot, we are going to do nice, strong, accented hits right on the bell. And there are 2 of those in this pattern, and it's immediately after we strike our rack tom with our left hand. And these also coincide with the first strike of our kick double. So here is that very slow. And the very last thing to note for this groove is, as mentioned before, we are going to repeat this 4 times, the first 3 of which are the exact same. The 4th time is pretty much the same, except the tom run going from the rack to the floor tom is going to be replaced by something that's actually simpler. It kind of stays along with the same rhythmic motif as the rest of the pattern. So instead of we're going to do this. So before, where we had right, left, in the same subdivision. First, we're going to hit the ride cymbal with our kick, then left hand on the rack tom, then right hand on the ride, followed by one more kick. So all together. In context. Now, real quick for you, I'm going to run through that whole part, all 4 repetitions, with the turnaround on the 4th going into the next section. So moving along, we go from that pattern over on the cymbals in the ride onto a kick, snare, hi-hat pattern. Once again, we are going to play this pattern through 4 times. It's pretty much the same every time, except this time around, it's the first repetition that's slightly different than the rest, not the last. And the main pattern we have is this. Here's that one more time very slowly. Note that every time this cycles around, we are putting a crash on beat 1 and we're opening up our hi-hat with most of our snare hits. So here's that very slow. Nothing too crazy there. As mentioned before, the very first time that we play this pattern is slightly different. And instead of doing a kick with a crash on beat 1, we are doing a snare with our ride coming out of that previous pattern. So the first time we play this, it sounds like this. Again, same pattern. We are just substituting a couple hits at the beginning. Sweet. So here's that coming out of the previous pattern so you can hear how that blends together. Now, immediately after that section, we go back into the pattern that we had before earlier in this video with the 2 measures of 5 and 1 measure of 7. We're going to do that cycle 1 time. There's a little bit extra ornamentation in there, but for the most part, it's laid out the exact same. There is another part where Danny uses slide doubles here. This time he does it twice in a row to, add some serious spice to the groove and, kind of create some more tension as the song builds. Again, that's triplet 16th subdivision on our hi-hat, staying with 8th notes, and then filling in the triplets with slides. You can do it with your double kick, but really to get the sound on the record, you're going to want to develop your single kick slide technique. So very slowly, that sounds like this. I'm going to play that real quick for you, how it sounds in this kind of reprisal section. Again, we're only going through that progression 1 time. And that takes us right up to the choose to let this go line. All right, now we're going to take all those pieces and put them together along with the click at both tempos. Here's that. And the last section of this song we are going to cover today is a reprisal of our rhythmic theme. Now, this starts with just some ornamental crashes that follow the bass guitar line. I'm not going to go too far into detail on that. We do have some double strokes that we're going to have to whip out on our ride cymbal though. So the first time is we get 30-second notes, which we cap off with a accented hit on the bell. And then that happens again, except it's triplet sixteenths. I'll play that section for you really quickly with the crashes thrown in there between. And that is where the rhythmic theme comes back. Now this time, instead of doing it on our floor toms, we are between the snare and the ride cymbal, and we are at a pretty low dynamic. And as we are doing that rhythmic theme, we are going to place those crashes and our kick along with them back in over top of it while keeping it going, and we will gradually crescendo into the next section. And here is that one slowly. Not a whole lot to that one. Let's run it with the click. All right, people, that is all I have for you in today's episode. Please, if you enjoyed the video or found it valuable, do the standard YouTube activities. Please like and comment on the video. Really helps me out, helps me get the video in front of more eyes. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you catch the next episodes coming out. Again, we are doing the entire song and we are working our way up to that crazy Grudge finale. So make sure you don't miss it. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and you will be up to date. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end, and I will see you next week in episode 3.